We're going to move on to the category of racial equity now, from racial equity to health equity. Our first question comes to us from Zainab Pixler of Detroit Shoreway.
What are your plans to address the root causes of food apartheid in the city of Cleveland?
She referred to food apartheid there, which is defined as highlighting the racial and discriminatory political structures that impact food access and control. This is slightly different than the more commonly heard food deserts we've heard about for some 30 years now, because there is an inferred intentionality. So she wants to know plans to address the root causes of food apartheid. Ross DeBella.
Well, I think this gets to poverty and accounting for every penny of our tax dollars and how we divvy out that money, right? So the immediate answer to the question is devote some of this $510 million ARPA money to get people to be the ones who solve this problem, right? Community gardens, CSAs, grocery stores, but it's gotta be a fiscal priority. And so that would start in January. We don't know how much of that money will be left at that time. I think the second half of it is to be used down the road, but this would be toward giving grants to people who will create for their neighbors on their street.
Council President Kelly.
Thank you. Very important question, and let me make this clear. When I'm mayor, your health outcomes and your life expectancy will not be determined by your zip code. As it gets to food apartheid, food insecurity, we're not asking the right questions when we think about health equity. In the neighborhood that I represent, Old Brooklyn, we took the step of making public health a community development issue, outside of bricks and mortar, outside of business development. And what we did is we started with a community health assessment. And the questions we asked weren't, when did you see the doctor last? What is your health plan? The questions we asked were, do you have access to fresh food? Do you live within a 10-minute walk of a park? Do you feel safe in your neighborhood? Do you have a job? Do you know your neighbors? These are the questions that we used to build community projects. That's what led to the Old Brooklyn Farmers Market. We were very surprised to find the number of families that were on SNAP in Old Brooklyn, but we responded. We responded because of the outreach that we did. We realized that we did have a food security issue in Old Brooklyn. We responded with a fresh food farmers market every Saturday. These are the types of decisions, these are the types of steps we need to take to make sure that we are really addressing health equities, and we're looking at the whole problem, and we're not looking for quick answers and addressing one small part of the issue. This is a serious issue in the city, and we need to have a holistic approach that has a neighborhood health equity lens for everything we do.
Councilman Reed, you represent an area that's seen supermarkets come and go. How do you keep that from happening?
You keep it by ensuring that the neighborhood, the community, first of all, is safe. People make a decision to move into a city or out of the city based on a number of things, but one of the things at the top of that list is safety. And what we've been able to do in Mount Pleasant was to attract Save-A-Lot and Aldi's into our community simply because we made it safer. As councilman, I put up over 125 surveillance cameras. As councilman, I had police officers walking the beat. As councilman, once again, I was out there talking to the residents and the merchants in Mount Pleasant and in Union Miles to find out, what did you want? What did you need? How can we help you? That's what a mayor needs to be doing. I am the most transparent former elected official in the entire city of Cleveland. So there's no substitute for the experience that I've shown over the last 17 years as a council person. That's how we did it in Mount Pleasant. That's what I'm going to do across the city of Cleveland.
Justin Bibb, what would you do?
Food insecurity and food deserts is a major crisis in the city. You know, my grandma, who just turned 92 a couple weeks ago, she has to take probably 2 buses to get to a grocery store that sells fresh fruits and vegetables. And that's the same story in many parts of our city. So number one, we actually need to fully fund our health department and have a targeted focus on food policy to figure out how can the city of Cleveland eradicate the barriers that exist from a policy and structural level to address this need. The other thing we should be doing is leveraging this investment with the Opportunity Corridor. Instead of prioritizing a police headquarters and an asphalt plant, thank God we killed that part of the deal, it should be leveraged as a food hub, investing in organizations like the Cleveland Kitchen Company to really embrace the food economy that can help eradicate the food desert issue we have, but also bring good paying jobs to those forgotten neighborhoods That'll be my strategy and plan as the next mayor of Cleveland.
Mr. Jones.
You know, you can't talk about this without not mentioning the MVP during the pandemic, which is the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. I mean, they did an absolute phenomenal job in taking care of tens and thousands of people. They're getting ready to build a new headquarters that we need to make sure that a part of this $511 million go towards assisting them. The second thing I want to say is, the first thing I did when I became councilman was created a food distribution center in my community. Over 1,000 people a month we feed. Why is that important? Because when you talk about food, in order to understand this, you have to know what it feels like to be hungry. I can remember living in the Salvation Army and living in homeless shelters in the city of Cleveland and knowing what it feels like to be hungry. You can't come up with a solution unless you know what it feels like to have that pain in your stomach. So the reality is that not only dealing with food apartheid will feed people, but it also helps our children. I remember being a young person going to Case Elementary and MLK Middle School and only going there because I can get some lunch. You know, I mean, children can't even pass their tests if they're hungry. So food is a major issue, and that's why in our community we do our distribution center and we support local farming in our neighborhoods.
We're going to move on to the next question, but Mr. Kucinich, I will get to you first. We're going to change questions, but stay within the topic. This question comes to us from India Robertson of the Glenville neighborhood.
Infant mortality is a tragic statistic in our community. As mayor, how will you put strategies in place to help with the infant mortality crisis?
Obviously not food, but still health. Mr. Kucinich.
Which crisis? Infant mortality.
Infant mortality is what she suggested, yes, but you were looking at food.
This is a heartbreaking condition in the city of Cleveland where we have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the country. And the paradox is we also have some of the best health systems in the country. And we've learned recently that some of the healthcare dollars that the community should have been anticipating would be put into it to deal with issues like infant mortality and lead poisoning have not been getting into the community. I expect to have a very good cooperative relationship with the head of our major hospitals to show how they can reach into the communities and communicate with people, let people know about services that are available, make their services available, make sure that, maternal and infant care becomes something that Cleveland can be known for instead of being a tragedy. So, you know, we can do something about this specifically because we are Cleveland. We can do this because we are Cleveland, because we have such great medical resources. You only need a mayor who's ready to reach out to that community and say, here's how we do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator, I know that you're the only person who didn't speak on this topic. Didn't mean to slight you. Go right ahead.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much for the question. Under the leadership of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, we have been working to address the issue of infant mortality for the last several years. And we were actually successful in getting a study committee and a group of people together from across the state of Ohio to come up with policies and procedures to reduce those challenges that women have. I was responsible for some of the funding that the university hospitals have to address the issue of infant mortality. We were able to fund Birthing Beautiful Babies to make sure they helped address some of the issues that we have in place. And see, we didn't just put our policies in place and did not fund them. We put millions of dollars behind the policies to make sure that communities like Cleveland have the ability to continue to address the issue. Now, I also want to say this. My father died when I was in the 3rd grade, and my mother raised 7 children on her own, and she had to feed all of us with one little Social Security check. So we had the basics, and I know and understand what it's like to be hungry on a regular basis. My mother made sure we ate before she ate, and that's why I have fought so hard to make sure that we get rid of food deserts. I was one of the main people to help Ridall Urban Farm get started. Not only help them get started, but help them address some shortfalls that they had with the city of Cleveland. Now, people come to the state of Ohio, come to the legislature and say, hey, we need funding because there are not a lot of people that are purchasing food. After the first week or so of the month, most grocery stores say they don't have a lot of business. So they ask for funding
Wrap
from the
quickly.
state of Ohio. I'll wrap that up. I helped to fight for that. But I can say this, if we want to make sure grocery stores stay in our community, we need to make sure people have jobs that they can actually go to the store and purchase the necessary food that they need. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, thank you. Mr. Kelly, we can't talk about infant mortality without mentioning First Year Cleveland.
Thank you, Rick. Neither can I. This was the first major issue I took on as council president. And I think that this is not a political issue to me. This is personal. As the father of 5 daughters, I can't imagine the pain of somebody who loses their baby before their first birthday. So I almost think that the term infant mortality has become too sanitized. We need to call this what this is. This is a health outcome that should be shameful to this city. It is shameful. We've made progress, but we need to keep going. What I realized when I started digging into this issue was that there was a lot of good people doing a lot of good things in this area, but they weren't doing so in any coordinated fashion, and they weren't funded at the level that was going to move the needle. And that's why we formed First Year Cleveland. We collaborated with the major health university. We collaborated with the philanthropic community, the community health providers. We had meeting after meeting to build First Year Cleveland. The whole goal was, what do we do to bring people together to rid this community of this shameful condition? And First Year Cleveland has made progress. We're moving the needle in infant mortality. But I know I'm over time, but I have to get this in because it's important to everything we've talked about. What First Year Cleveland revealed when we started digging into the numbers is that if you take away some of the presumptions of why we had this terrible rate of infant mortality, not getting prenatal care, the health of the mother, everything, you strip all that away, there was one thing that determined whether that baby was going to live to their first birthday, and that was the race of the mother. And that is something that we declared as First Year Cleveland. We're the first umbrella organization to make that statement. That's what led to the 400 Years of Racism Conference. And that's where, when we talk about racism as public health, we have to remember that this is undergirding a lot of our public health crises. And really, First Year Cleveland was a first step towards addressing infant mortality. But again, this needs to be a clear your desk moment. We need to deal with this every single day until we do not live in a community where we have a disproportionate number of babies that die before their first birthday.
Thank you, Councilman. Last on this is going to be Mr. Jones. I'm going to give you the full minute.
Thank you so much. You know, it's just so interesting to hear, people wake up now. This has been an issue for a long time. Racism has been a public health crisis for a long time. And the fact is, let's be more specific than just saying infant mortality. Let's say black infant mortality. That's a whole nother issue. And I think that this is something that we are even afraid to talk about. If you want to talk about black infant mortality, you cannot discuss it without talking about structural racism and the impact that it has. So as mayor, what I would like to see in this city, if we're going to attack this issue, is I plan to increase the amount of black women doulas in our city. Black women doulas. Why? Because people who are going through pain also need the solutions. We don't need people from the outside telling us what we need to do to make our situation better. We understand it clearly. And Ward 7 is where the headquarters of Birth and Beautiful Communities is. And I appreciate Senator Williams for supporting such an amazing initiative ran by President Jasmine Long. It's a very important conversation. We cannot talk about black infant mortality without talking about structural racism. And to go back, Rick, we cannot talk about crime without talking about poverty. Poverty is the greatest crime. Crime is just a symptom of the bigger issue.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move on.